Hey, welcome to Spectral Echoes, a collection of Reddit stories as told by people high as a kite. But it's Reddit, who knows, right? If you like the video, don't forget to like and subscribe, so you don't miss out on these awesome horror stories. Now, let's get started.
Do you believe in Folklore Part 2? The Face on the Cliff.
Jackson has been my best friend since our first year of university. He's always been drawn to things that are high, dangerous, remote, and so cold they send shivers down one's spine. He'd climbed numerous peaks in the American Northwest, camped alone on Colorado summits in the snow, and even slept at the foot of Mount Rainier just to witness the moment the mist cascaded down like a waterfall. That autumn, he told me he wanted to conquer a cliff face on the edge of the Rocky Mountains, which climbers jokingly called the Devil's Face. Not because the climb was perilous, but because that west-facing rock angle sometimes revealed a grotesque, cold, and empty countenance, with a forehead, cheekbones, and eye sockets so deep they looked as if someone had fallen asleep for centuries within the stone. He'd heard locals speak of a taboo passed down through generations, that in the dry season, if the reddish light of the late afternoon sun struck that stone face directly, one absolutely must not look straight at it, must not think it resembles a human, and above all, must not take its photograph. Because, as they claimed, the entity within disliked being recognized. Jackson laughed, as he always did whenever he heard what he considered mere folklore, and told me that if he could capture that face at precisely the right moment, the photo would be a marvel among climbers, a kind of title no one dared to claim. 3 days after Jackson left the climbing station, I received a photo from his phone, accompanied by a brief message, "I think I've seen it." The image showed a sheer rock face amidst pine trees, where the deep red afternoon sun shone directly onto a protrusion resembling an aged human face, full of rough textures and dark rock hollows like burnt-out eyes. Even as just a photo, I felt uneasy looking at it. I couldn't explain why the forehead of the stone face gave me the sensation of looking up at someone from the bottom of a staircase, while its mouth was slightly curved, not a smile, but a condescending sneer. I didn't reply. I didn't even dare to save the photo on my phone. That evening, Jackson messaged again, saying he had returned to the climbing station but couldn't sleep. Not because of the cold or bears, but because every time he closed his eyes, he clearly saw that stone face on the tent ceiling, staring down as if it knew he was looking at it again. In the following days, Jackson left the station and returned to the city, but things didn't stop. He called me one rainy afternoon, his voice hoarse and broken, saying he felt he wasn't walking alone anymore. That every time he walked down the dormitory corridor, he always heard footsteps behind him, always saw a shadow on the wall that didn't match his movements, and sometimes that shadow stood still while he continued to walk. I tried to reassure him, thinking he might be suffering from post-climb stress syndrome or sleep deprivation, but after that call, I started to pay more attention. In Jackson's recent photos, his face was subtly changing. His eyes were always slightly darting to the right, as if checking something behind him, and even when he smiled, the corners of his lips trembled, a very slight tremor, but as if he was trying to keep himself from panicking. One particularly cold night, I received the final call. It was around 2 in the morning, my phone vibrated incessantly. When I answered, I heard rapid breathing on the other end, then Jackson's voice, as if choked, "I can't breathe anymore. I see myself in the mirror but that image isn't breathing." Then came a heavy thud and the line went dead. The next morning, Jackson was found lying on the concrete courtyard of the dormitory, having fallen from the second floor. His hand clutched a small piece of rock, its origin unknown, but it had horizontal fissures, identical to the forehead of the face in that photo. Everyone assumed he had attempted suicide, but fortunately, Jackson did not die. He only suffered a broken leg and a dislocated arm. We, along with our professors, took him to the hospital for treatment, then transferred him back to his hometown for his parents to care for him. He took a semester off but later returned to continue with us as if nothing had happened. He didn't recount much about the incident, only saying that for a period he lost cognitive control, and it seemed the dreams continued incessantly, as if each time he closed his eyes, he was pulled back to the moment the red light fell upon the stone face, and those unblinking eyes opened, looking at him with something that wasn't anger, but a demand for recompense. I didn't press further. After all, he was alive, and that was enough to be grateful for. But there is one detail I have never told anyone, because I myself don't know if I should believe it. A week after Jackson was discharged from the hospital, I tried to open his old messages again. The original photo had been deleted, but I still had a copy saved on my memory card. I opened it, zoomed in, and looked closely at that stone face once more, and this time, I saw it more clearly. There was a small dark spot on the right cheek, round, like a mole. And I realized it was identical to the mole on Jackson's face. As I scrolled further through my photo library, I found another picture, its sending time unknown, its sender unclear. The photo showed two faces, side by side, printed from a blurred pane of glass. Both were smiling, their smiles disturbingly similar. One face was Jackson's, the other was stone, but now it had wide open eyes, and its mouth was twisted into a sneer. I deleted the photo, but every time I walk past a west-facing cliff on any journey, I no longer look up. Not because I fear the stone, but because I know some things are retained by memory, by images, and by eyes that never close. If you hear someone speak of the stone face in the Rockies, just listen. Don't try to look. Don't try to prove it's real. Because you will carry it with you, in your mirror, in your shadow, and in your very breath.
The thirsty vein of rock.
I never thought I would have to tell this story, not because I want to share or seek pity, but simply because if I don't recount it in my own words, I fear there will come a time when I will believe that it was all just a phase of delusional disorder, a hallucination brought on by stress, by chemicals, by any reason that allows one to easily forgive things that cannot be explained by reason. But if that were the case, why do the images, the sounds, the sensations remain so vivid in my mind, as if they happened just last night, as if that thing, that vein of rock, is still somewhere, quietly whispering my name from deep within the earth? It all began when I joined a small geological survey team, working on an experimental well drilling project in the Cumberland Mountains, eastern Kentucky. The area had numerous underground springs but was also riddled with warnings from the local populace. They weren't rude or overtly superstitious, but they were very firm whenever they mentioned the cluster of reddish cracked rocks near the edge of the camp, where faint, hairline fractures resembling fingernails crisscrossed, stained with a rust-like red hue. They said not to drill there, not for technical or safety reasons, but because of an ancient legend that it was where the thirsty rock resided. Each time it was disturbed, the land there would demand a portion of water from within a person, and if it wasn't sufficiently quenched, it would find its own way to open other channels. I remember laughing, not out of scorn, but because I couldn't believe that in the 21st century, people still spoke of rocks as if they possessed consciousness, hunger, or memory. Yet, I still proposed drilling precisely next to that rock cluster, for the simple reason that the depth and water pressure readings there were better than anywhere else in the vicinity. And so we did. We drilled through layers of sediment, through soft rock, until the water gushed forth, clear but with a very strange smell, not of mud or algae, but a faint metallic scent mixed with damp earth, very subtle, almost like the smell of blood from a fingertip cut by paper, a scent so familiar it made me curious rather than cautious. The water was warm, always warm, even early in the morning when the ground was still covered in dew and my jacket wasn't enough to keep me warm. It wasn't boiling hot, just warm enough to make one think there was a breath, something living beneath. But I didn't think much of it. I washed my face with it, took a few sips, and later even used it to wash my hair and bathe every day. That warmth was truly pleasant. It soothed my skin, cleaned off road dust, and made me feel as if I was being energized by something more primordial than sunlight. But a few days later, I began to feel a tingling sensation in my wrists. Initially, it was very faint, just like pinpricks, then it escalated into a burning sensation, as if salt was being rubbed into a wound. I thought it was an allergy, or some chemical reaction. But what truly panicked me wasn't on my skin but in my ears, in the water pipes, in the silent moments in the middle of the night, where I heard a very faint, very small sound, like someone groaning from beneath the floor, from inside the faucet, like the wind whistling through a keyhole but carrying syllables. And when I listened more closely, I heard my name, whispered very slowly, very coldly, as if someone trapped in a confined space was using their last breath to call me out. I started to suffer from insomnia. Each time I lay down, would hear the steady dripping sound, neither fast nor slow, not falling from the ceiling but seemingly seeping from inside the steel pipes. Then some nights I heard clanking noises beneath the floor, like someone tapping a spoon against the side of a water tank, followed by the sound of water hissing through pipes even though all the faucets were tightly shut. I tried sealing the bathtub, disconnecting all main valves, but the calling continued, no louder, no clearer, but as if it no longer existed in physical space, but had woven itself somewhere into my mind, a place I couldn't lock, where there was no main valve, where even a tiny crack would allow the water to flood in. I didn't tell anyone, because I wasn't even sure if I was sane. I only remember one evening, I sat in the bathroom, no lights, no phone, only the sound of water in my head and the faucet dripping rhythmically as if counting time. And in that silence, I heard more than just my name. I heard someone crying, someone laughing, then someone whispering as if telling me a story in a language that wasn't English, wasn't German, wasn't a human language. And I sat there, fully awake, fully conscious, simply unable to get up because one part of my mind wanted to leave, while the other part just wanted to bend down and touch the liquid that was calling me. I returned home in a state of panic, having lost weight, my hands ulcerated to the point of needing bandages. But what frightened my family most wasn't my appearance but my behavior. They said I no longer ate or drank normally. I didn't speak, I just sat for hours next to the public water tap, cupping water in my hands and smiling like a child. Once, I was caught digging a deep hole with my bare hands by the riverbank, my fingernails torn, blood soaking the earth. My mouth whispered phrases like, "It's not full yet. I will give it to drink." Then I would burst out laughing as if I had just heard an old story I had told myself long ago. After that day, I was admitted to the hospital. I didn't resist, didn't speak, and for the first 3 months, I uttered no words. I just sat and watched, and whenever someone turned on the tap to wash their hands or take medicine, I would instinctively reach out, catching each drop, then murmur something that I myself don't remember saying. An intern doctor tried to record my voice. They discovered I was speaking an unknown language, not matching any living or dead linguistic system they could encode. But the words I used were repetitive, mainly revolving around ideas of thirst, of penetration, of subterranean flows seeking an upward path. The doctors diagnosed me with acute psychosis due to accumulated stress, possibly due to mild metal poisoning from the water source, or certain minerals causing central nervous system disorders. They said recovery was possible but would be very slow, very fragile, and required strict avoidance of stimulating environments like strong light, loud noises, or running water. But I knew it wasn't just minerals, because every time I closed my eyes, in my dreams, I still found myself back there, standing amidst the red rocks, hearing the water roar from beneath the earth like a heartbeat, and I always woke up with the sensation of my hands being wet and my mouth still tasting of blood. I am better now. I no longer hear the calling every night. I no longer want to sit for hours collecting water. But I still cannot take a warm bath, not because my skin hasn't fully healed, but because I fear that one day, the steam will cling to the mirror, and from within it, that voice will echo again, thirsty, persistent, and waiting. I tried to bathe once, just once, and in the moment the warm water flowed over my eyes and the mirror fogged up, I saw reflected not myself, but a soaking wet figure, long matted hair, smiling. And I knew that if I stayed there for even one more second, that other person would step out. I haven't dared to return to Cumberland, never to that cluster of cracked rocks, that place they call the thirsty vein of rock, because I think, if I return, perhaps I will bend down, reach out to touch the water, and will never pull my hand back again.
The Scarecrow of the Cornfield.
I once thought scarecrows were nothing more than a rustic joke, a kind of primitive charm erected by ancient peoples to soothe their fears of crop failure, fears stemming from the earth, from the heavens, from things beyond human control. Over time, they morphed into an archaic symbol, a prop for horror films, or a craft project for children in autumn. I never once believed they could be real, that they could house someone's soul, or worse, replace someone, until I lost Lee. Lee, my college roommate, was perhaps as far removed from superstition as one could be. He lived by data, breathed by logic, believing everything could be explained with the right camera angle, the right lighting, or, if necessary, a corrective social media post complete with illustrative graphs. He once told me, every bizarre phenomenon is just insufficient data. So, when he landed a summer internship at an organic farm in rural Kansas, he didn't view it as grueling manual labor but rather as an outdoor excursion combined with content creation for his newly launched YouTube channel, documenting fascinating aspects of rural life, local folklore, and the truth behind what people called legends. In a video posted around his second week, Lee appeared amidst a vast cornfield. He was constructing a traditional scarecrow, deliberately distorting it, adding sunglasses, and even rigging a headphone cord from a broken pair of AirPods. Then, he looked directly into the camera and recited a mock incantation, mimicking a phrase locals whispered, in a teasing, nasal voice, "The guardian of the land, blood turned to straw, stands unblinking through the night, leaving no trace by dawn." I laughed then, loudly even, at how he turned everything into a satirical jest. But perhaps I failed to notice how some of the farmhands, watching the clip, avoided looking at the screen, and one longtime worker sighed softly and shook his head. No one said anything, but no one shared the video either. The next evening, I received a call from Lee. His voice was small and slow, devoid of its usual excitement. He said he had dreamed of standing in the cornfield at midnight, no moon, no wind, the sky so dark he could hear his own heartbeat. And at his feet, something slithered through the dry straw, scratching and rustling. He dared not look down, but he distinctly heard every drag, then a human figure, thin, tall, hunched, slowly approached, crawling low to the ground as if sniffing out a human scent. Its face was unclear, its eyes absent, only its head tilted towards him. Lee then woke up, drenched in sweat, believing it was just a dream, until he discovered his feet were covered in mud, and a trail of mud stretched from his room door all the way to his bed, even though the door was locked, the floor dry, and no one else had a key. I tried to rationalize it, suggesting he was sleepwalking or overly fixated on his own joke. But strange things began to happen, not just to him, but to me too. Because I was the first one Lee told, the first one to laugh, and the only one to witness his gradual change most clearly. First, there were a few strands of straw in his shoes, then in his backpack, his books, on the dining table, on his pillow. And then one day, I opened a lunchbox Lee had brought back to the farm but hadn't put in the fridge. I saw a thin layer of straw covering the food, meticulously woven as if someone had arranged it very carefully, not scattered by accident but intentionally left behind, like a sign. Lee gradually became withdrawn. His eyes were perpetually bruised underneath, his lips chapped, his skin sallow as if from lack of sleep and sunlight, even though he still went to work every day. But when no one was paying attention, he would stand in front of the mirror for hours, mumbling something I couldn't quite hear. One morning, I woke early to the faint sound of thread being pulled tight. Stepping out, I saw Lee sitting at the table, holding a small doll made of straw and twine, sewing its mouth shut with red thread. The stitches were crooked but chillingly tight. When I asked what he was doing, he didn't look at me, only said very softly, to stop it from calling my name anymore. That evening, a tremendous storm broke. Lightning flashed across the sky, and the wind was so strong it tore off the shed roof behind the farm. The power had gone out early, and everyone rushed out to check the warehouse to reinforce the barriers as water began to rise. Lee, however, was gone. No one had seen him after dinner. His phone was left in his sleeping bag, his jacket hung neatly, but he wasn't there. I called him for a long time. The whole group split up to search, flashlights sweeping continuously between the corn rows, calls echoing amidst the cold wind and the rustling sound of cornstalks colliding as if hundreds of dry hands were lightly touching the searchers' shoulders. No one found Lee, no footprints, not a single message. And that night ended in an eerie silence, as if he had never been there at all. The next morning, right at the beginning of the field, on the patch of ground where the old Scarecrow had been knocked down by the wind the day before, stood a new Scarecrow. It was life-sized, tightly bundled with straw, its framework even having protrusions like real joints. And it wore the brown jacket Lee used to wear, old, faded, with a small gray band-aid on the shoulder that I myself had put on during his first week when it tore from catching on a hook. Someone from the farm approached, but no one dared to touch it. The farm owner simply looked, then quietly turned his back and walked away. He murmured, almost breathed, "Someone needs to stand guard now, from this day forth." Lee never returned. His belongings were packed into 2 boxes and sent to his home address, but his family said no one at home received them. His phone number remained unreachable. His YouTube channel ceased activity the day the Scarecrow video was uploaded. And I, even having returned to school, still always remember Lee's joking incantation from that day, "Stands unblinking through the night," because I could never shake the feeling that that Scarecrow had once been my friend. To this day, I still think about him. Sometimes in my dreams, I see endless cornfields, and in the middle, a human figure stands motionless in the wind, its head tilted towards me, its shoulders still draped in that old, dark jacket. And I don't know if calling his name would make him turn, or if he would just tilt a little further and dissolve into the rotting dry straw, fiber by fiber.
The backwards wall.
I once thought I understood Clara, that second-year student with her hair tied up high, perpetually wearing headphones, always occupying the last desk in my art class. She wasn't the most technically skilled or compositionally adept student, but she possessed something very few students her age did, a gaze that not only looked outward, but also seemed to be constantly listening to something from deep within, something she couldn't name but relentlessly tried to capture with every layer of pencil, every stroke of color. I taught Clara for 2 consecutive semesters and vividly remember the first time she submitted a piece, a portrait of a figure seated in a corner, hands resting loosely on the floor, eyes not looking out but seeming to listen to something behind the wall. I asked why she didn't paint the figure looking forward. Clara merely smiled and said, "Because the thing behind the wall is quieter when I draw." The comment sounded eccentric at the time, but it was the endearing eccentricity of an art student learning to express emotion through images. So, I didn't think much of it. I just made a mental note to observe her more closely, as people with such a gaze often lead solitary lives, and solitude is far more likely to slip into darkness than any professional failure. That autumn, Clara was selected for a collaboration program with the State Historical Archives in Astoria, a 6-week project to document the interior of an old, abandoned church dating back to 1912. It mostly involved sketching architecture, objects, and describing spaces for archival reconstruction purposes, a seemingly simple, even somewhat tedious task. But Clara was excited. She said she wanted to try painting a space where the last people who were there have long been gone. I even wrote a letter of recommendation for her, signed and sent it with confidence, believing that perhaps places like this would help her find new material for her unique perspective. Initially, everything was fine. Clara sent a few drawings, pencil sketches of wooden ceilings, broken window panes, and a decaying altar. But then, around the 3rd week, I noticed something change, not just in her drawings. which had begun to grow messy and layered, but also in her communication. When on video calls with me, Clara often glanced off-screen, her voice monotonous, flat. Sometimes she would answer a question and then fall silent for a long time, as if drawn into something. I asked if she was all right. She responded with a single sentence that instantly sent shivers down my spine. "Teacher, the wall, it's drawing me back." I initially thought Clara was talking about a reverse perspective effect, about how the light reflecting in the church could cause confusion between inside and out. But then she sent me a drawing, drawn in charcoal, dark and powerful, of the old brick wall. And from between the mortar lines, a hand was reaching out. The fingers were indistinct, but it bore enough scratches and the posture suggested that from within, someone was trying to reach out. I thought it was a detail Clara had added for emotional impact, but she insisted I didn't draw that part. This morning I opened my board and it was there. The next morning, she sent another photo. This time, the hand was in a different spot on the same wall, shifted about a meter, and there was a new scratch mark. Clara said she had dreamt of scratching noises the night before, like fingernails dragging across rotting wood, steady and persistent. The sound followed her even after waking. I began to worry genuinely. I messaged Clara, urging her to stop the project, stop filming, stop drawing, and return to campus. I even offered to call a car to pick her up. But when I saw her again on screen, she looked at me for a long time, the kind of look from someone who knows they can no longer turn back, then said very softly, "If I stop, it won't leave." I don't know what that it was, a dream, an obsession, a psychological breakdown, or something deeper, situated between two layers of consciousness. I only know that after that call, Clara stopped all contact. No messages, no emails, no updates to her personal accounts. The lights in the art studio were found on all night, the door locked from the inside, but no one saw Clara leave. When they forced the door open, they found the entire wall, from floor to ceiling, covered with the same repeating drawing, a woman's face twisted into a smile so distorted it was almost a cry, her eyes swollen and bruised as if beaten, her skin wrinkled as if drawn by an uncontrolled hand. The charcoal strokes were deeply imprinted into the wall, as if someone had used all their strength to push the lines from the other side. I thought I had lost Clara. But 3 months later, she returned. Thinner, her hair cut short at the nape of her neck, her left hand still bandaged, her gait slow and hesitant, like someone who had emerged from a place without light for too long. When I asked what had happened, Clara didn't answer clearly, only saying, "I drew it again, precisely, every wrinkle, every distortion, then I buried that version with some things in the church basement. From that day, the dream stopped." She said she had to go away for a while, not to hide, but to continue drawing, to draw until that thing stopped looking at her. And from that day, Clara never drew architecture or realistic portraits again. All her work shifted to abstraction, only 3 colors, red, black, and white, each piece a heavy, flowing mass, like diluted blood and burnt charcoal mixed together. I didn't ask further. I knew there were things that, if asked, would only make someone recall what they had tried to suppress. But many nights, when I sit in the old art classroom, looking towards the wall at the back, where Clara used to sit for 2 entire semesters, I sometimes still feel as if a faint, indistinct hand is lightly sketching on the wall, unclear if it's from this side or the other.
The Heirloom music box in Charlevoix.
I cannot believe I was ever like that. Truly. Sometimes, when I look back at the doctor's notes, the harrowing accounts from bewildered friends, and the unsettling old messages I don't even remember writing, I feel as if I'm peering into the life of an entirely different person. It's as if some fleeting, spectral version of myself briefly inhabited my body for a few disquieting weeks, then departed without so much as a whisper, leaving me with vast, echoing voids in my memory that, even now, nearly 5 years later, I haven't been able to fully comprehend or, indeed, to truly fill. The year was late 2019, and I embarked on a long-anticipated journey to Canada with my closest university friends. This wasn't just any trip, it was meant to be a grand, celebratory farewell to our shared youth, a final collective adventure before the inevitable divergence of our individual paths. We chose a tour exploring the ancient, weather-beaten historical sites of Charlevoix, a mesmerizing region nestled somewhere between the endless, snow-dusted forests and layers of profound history. In this remote corner of the world, time itself seemed to slow to a glacial crawl, laying down a thin, almost palpable sheet of ice over every rough-hewn stone wall, every creaking, decaying wooden step, and every faded, whispered trace of the old French colonial era that stubbornly clung to the landscape. Accompanying our small, eager group was a local guide, an older gentleman whose voice was a deep, resonating rumble and whose demeanor was one of unyielding, almost solemn seriousness. He consistently, meticulously emphasized what we were strictly forbidden to touch within the venerable confines of the old houses. He pointed out various artifacts and relics that had been sealed off, meticulously protected for the sake of their preservation. He was particularly insistent about those items intrinsically linked to the more unsettling local folk tales, stories that had never been officially documented in any academic text, existing only as hushed, almost furtive whispers passed down through generations by the eldest inhabitants of the village. I listened intently, nodded dutifully, and then, almost immediately, forgot his warnings. I consider myself neither careless nor one to flout regulations. But there was an inexplicable pull, an unseen force, I can only describe it as, that compelled me to approach the antique musical box. It was nestled securely behind a thick pane of glass in a small, dimly lit room within what was once an orphanage, now reverently converted into a historical exhibition space. The box itself was made of dark, aged wood, its brass winding mechanism tarnished with the patina of centuries, resting in profound silence behind its dusty glass enclosure. At its very base, a clear, stark warning sign, penned in both elegant French and plain English, explicitly forbade opening it for conservation reasons. Yet, despite this, I did precisely that. No one was standing near me. No one attempted to intervene. I only recall my hand, as if guided by an invisible thread, reaching out and lifting the lid of the box. And then, the music began. It was slow and profoundly chilling, a sorrowful, haunting lullaby that felt less like melody and more like blood seeping slowly through forgotten cloth, utterly wordless, and possessing a chilling sense of being without an end. The guide's immediate shout echoed through the quiet space, my friends gasped in startled unison, and I, in turn, simply spun around, a strange, serene smile on my face. I distinctly remember saying, with an unsettling calmness, that I merely wished to hear it play, as if this act were the most innocuous thing imaginable on earth. But that very evening, nestled in the comfort of the Auberge Hotel, perched on a snow-white hillside, I began to hear the music echoing, faintly but persistently, from within the very walls of my room. At first, my roommate, still somewhat bewildered by my earlier behavior, dismissed it as stray sounds from an adjacent room or a forgotten radio left playing. Yet, the music persisted, repeating itself over and over, with an unnerving steadiness, as if some unseen entity were perpetually lulling a child who simply refused to succumb to sleep. 3 nights later, my friend, now truly in a state of sheer panic, desperately called the guide. He recounted waking at precisely 3 in the morning to find me sitting rigidly upright in bed, my back stiff and unyielding. My hands were clutching a torn pillow, and my mouth was softly, almost imperceptibly, singing along to the faint, yet ever-present music. My eyes, he described, were wide open, unblinking, and utterly vacant, like those of someone who had been dead for a very, very long time. Of those subsequent days, I remember nothing. But I began to draw. Obsessively. Prolifically. My entire notebook became crammed, page after page, with tiny, nameless human figures, each rendered without a face, standing in precise, unbroken circles. Some figures were depicted with their backs turned to the viewer, some with their heads eerily tilted, but not a single one ever looked outward, towards the observer. I found myself murmuring constantly, incessantly, that they weren't asleep, that I had to keep singing, repeating the words like a broken record, the needle forever caught, never allowing the song to reach its conclusion. I was eventually transferred to a psychiatric institution situated near Quebec City. My medical file noted that I no longer possessed clear self-awareness, communicated minimally if at all, and failed to react to even the simplest questions. But what captivated the doctors most, what truly set me apart, was my profound and violent reaction to sound, particularly to any form of music. Whenever someone inadvertently played a tune, I would be seized by a violent agitation, convulsing, screaming, and frantically attempting to cover my ears with anything I could lay my hands on. On one unforgettable occasion, I literally tore all 10 of my fingernails raw, desperately trying to carve into the wall a scrawled message, smeared with my own blood and brick dust. The music needs to be repeated until the children fall asleep. My recollections of those harrowing days within the institution remain nothing more than a dense, impenetrable mist in my mind. They are indistinct, without sequence or logical order. I cannot recall what I ate, when I managed to sleep, or with whom I might have conversed. Yet, I vividly remember the damp, musty smell of the old walls, the sickly, pale white glow of the fluorescent light bulbs, and the pervasive, chilling sensation of dozens of tiny, unseen eyes staring intently at me every single night. They came from nowhere in particular, they simply were present. The Heirloom musical box itself subsequently vanished. It was conspicuously absent from the museum's inventory list. No one working at the museum could recall who had last handled it. The guide, the solemn man who had been the unfortunate witness to my act of opening the box, later stated simply that he had heard that particular music just once more, when he was alone, meticulously cleaning the archives. However, he never offered any further details, and from that day forward, he steadfastly refused to participate in any more guided tours within that particular historical area. As for me, I am now said to have recovered, or at the very least, to be lucid enough to navigate a seemingly normal version of life. I meticulously avoid all musical instruments. I no longer draw. I do not sing. I never sleep with my room door open. I refuse to use body pillows. But every single year, around the desolate end of December, precisely on the first night of truly heavy snow, when the very air becomes so unnervingly silent that I can even hear the pulse of my own blood behind my ears, I often wake at a very vague and unsettling hour. And I find myself sitting upright in the middle of my room, my back as straight and taut as a pulled string, my hands gently, carefully resting on an old pillow, and my mouth, to my profound unease, is silently moving. I don't remember the words. I don't remember the tune. I only know that I am, in that moment, lulling something I cannot see. And I fear, with a deep, chilling certainty, that if I were to ever stop singing, that thing would awaken once more, would step out from the oppressive silence of the wall, and would settle down beside me, eternally demanding to hear the music again, from the very beginning.
If you like the video, don't forget to like and subscribe, so you don't miss out on these awesome horror stories.